Welcome to No One Tells You This. I'm Laura Massetti. Nobody tells you that the skills that get you into the room are not always the skills that help you lead once you're there. Nobody tells you what it actually costs to carry responsibility for others, or what it feels like to make decisions when the answers aren't clear. Nobody tells you what the best leaders actually do differently on the inside. My guest today has spent 2 decades sitting in those conversations with hundreds of leaders across some of the most demanding organizations in the world. Eric Nitzberg is an executive coach and trusted advisor to CEOs and C-suite leaders across technology, software, and life sciences. Before launching his coaching practice, he spent several years as a communication coach at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, teaching executive presence and persuasive storytelling. He's known for his ability to help successful leaders evolve and for bringing a deep humanity to his work that builds the kind of trust that most people spend their whole careers looking for. Eric, before we get into anything else, I want people listening to hear who you are, how you got here, because the path from Stanford to building your own coaching practice is not a straight line. Can you walk us through your journey?
I was a Chinese language and literature major in college. So I finished college with a liberal arts degree and no job and no idea what kind of job I would be able to get. And then I worked in retail for a number of years, I guess 2 or 3 years early on. And then I worked in the ministry. So I used to be a church leader here in Silicon Valley for a number of years before I got into coaching. And then after, I guess, about a dozen years of that, I got kind of burned out and didn't really see a path forward continuing with that. And then I kind of fell into coaching. It was not planned. It was not even an industry that I fully knew existed or what it was, but that's what I ended up doing. And it's been great.
So what sort of people come to you for coaching?
Well, most of my work now is with senior executives, so it's a combination of CEOs and people who are leading large organizations, mostly in technology companies, more here in Silicon Valley, but also globally. And I also do some work in life sciences, so pharmaceutical companies and other life sciences companies. I would say, that said, while that's my main focus, I do work with some middle managers and occasionally some earlier career high potentials, but most of my work is focused in the C-suite.
Amazing, amazing. And I love that you've had the church experience in your background, because that's a whole different sort of leadership skills and styles. So tell me, what have you learned from that as far as leadership?
Well, I learned a lot. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes and I worked really hard. I had I would say a calling to do that work when I was in my early 20s. And so I thought that I was going to do that for my whole life. And oh gosh, what did I learn? I think probably one of the biggest lessons has to do with the importance of people and relationships in leadership. You know, when I was in my, say, mid-20s and I was reading books about leadership and really excited about it, I was a little more focused on maybe techniques or things like vision and like all the tools of being a good leader. And I think my takeaway after all this time is it really is almost entirely about human beings and your relationship with them and how much you care. Do you really care about the mission of the organization? Do you really care about the people that you're leading, trying to help them? Those things actually really do matter, and they probably matter more than anything that you're going to read in a book about leadership.
That's amazing. And that's what I continue to hear from folks that I've spoken to recently on this topic. It's why the vision, the purpose, if you don't have that connected to what you're doing, I think it's impossible to be an effective leader.
Well, yeah, vision really is, I guess, at the core of leadership. Where are we going together? And if you don't have that, you're not really going anywhere. But also, I guess my point is also the people and your connections with the people is so foundational. And I think that's something maybe I would have been able to say that out loud when I was 25, but I don't think I really understood that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how interesting. So what do you think that is something that young professionals get wrong about what leadership actually looks like? Because like most, they come out of university, they come out of their MBA and say, I want to be that CEO of that company. What are those qualities and features look like in a leader?
One of the things that I think occurs to me when you ask that is there are many different kinds of leaders. Just yesterday, I was talking to a client who's leading in one of these hyper-growth AI companies. And, the concern came up, well, do I have the right personality to lead? Or do I have the right style? Do I need to change my style to be a better leader? And my comment was, you really need to bring who you are. And there may be things that you need to add to your toolbox in order to be more effective. Maybe your natural communication style is more direct, and you need also to learn how to be diplomatic at times. So there may be tools that you need to add, but you certainly don't need to change the fundamentals of who you are and your personality. You can take any kind of personality and become an extraordinary leader. It's not about that. It's really about the behaviors, the leadership behaviors that you learn. And so I guess one of my messages would be, I think anyone can be a successful leader if they really apply themselves.
That's great. That's encouraging, because I feel like typically when you see leaders out there, they tend to be the loudest people in the room, talk the most during meetings, or always have something to say. But what you're saying is that's not the case.
No, I mean, some of the most phenomenal leaders that I've worked with have been quiet leaders. And not brash, not abrasive, not loud, not pushy, but quietly working really hard and really smart and coming up with new innovations and caring deeply about their teams and just driving this vision that they have for the organization. But it does not require that you be extroverted. It does not require that you have a certain style. Some of my favorite leaders are actually quiet leaders.
Who are your favorite leaders?
You mean like public personalities?
Yeah.
I don't talk publicly about specific leaders or specific companies, just because I never know when that person is going to ask me to work with them, or
their competitor.
Right? There's a little bit of risk for me to be too public about that. But generally, I gravitate towards leaders who are mission driven, who are very clearly up to doing good in the world, trying to make the world a better place, trying to do good by their various stakeholders, trying to, take care of the environment. And some of your listeners might be surprised, but in corporations, even in the United States, which is kind of the ground zero for capitalism right now, most of the corporate leaders that I've ever worked with are good people, like good-hearted people that really care. They care about their teams, they care about their organization, they're trying to take care of their families, and that is direct experience is somewhat at odds with what you see in the media today, where there are leaders, big public figures who seem to be much more self-centered or power hungry or whatever. But that's not been my experience. Even with the most senior leaders that I've worked with who are leading, 10,000 people or 100,000 people, they're trying to do some good.
Yeah, I would say that that's the reason why most people get into business, to do good. And you're right, I think it becomes I think there's a struggle that happens, right? When people gain power throughout, whenever that may be. And how do you handle that power that you're given? And there's different choices that you can make around that. And I think that's probably part of the persona that comes out during those periods of they're trying to figure out their leadership path. They're trying to figure out how they exert their power while still maintaining humility and their purpose that drove them there.
I do think it's kind of dangerous for really young people to get into very high profile, high power positions really early in their lives, because for people of any age, there is this same risk. But I think particularly for younger people, it's just like becoming famous when you're really young, and suddenly you're in the public eye, you're 20 years old and millions of people are paying attention to you. I think that puts a certain kind of pressure on somebody's personality that can be distorting. I think it can really be a negative influence for that person. And it can be hard to recover from that. I think people who have tremendous success earlier in their careers. I remember one CEO that I didn't really work with him closely, but I kind of rubbed shoulders with him at one point, and he had a really big success early in his career. And then forevermore, he seemed to think that he just knew it all and that he was just right about everything. And he didn't really listen to other people because his life experience had taught him that he knew and that he was right. And you can see what the danger of that is, because maybe the next time he wasn't right. And then people around him, he doesn't have the benefit of their voices because he's overly confident. I think that's a risk of early success.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I also think that's also the power of coaches, like what you do. Always having someone in a safe space that you can work with and get feedback off of. as well as mentors. There are new skills that you need to learn and there's feedback that you're given. And sometimes that adjustment doesn't feel great for someone.
That was my experience. I think when I was in high school, I was super confident. School was easy for me. I was a good student. I liked it. I got good grades. I did well in college. And then it was kind of like hitting a brick wall to enter the workforce. Certainly as a liberal arts major, it might be a little different if I had been an engineering major or business major. But it took me a while to adapt, like several years to adapt and start figuring out a path forward for myself, even what I wanted to do, but also like how to be successful in the workplace. I was always motivated and ambitious and worked hard but that didn't, even with all of that, I mean, there were a lot of disappointments and frustrations and ups and downs. And I think that's a common experience for people as they enter the workforce.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I want to pivot to your work at Stanford, and I'd like you to share a little bit more on what that has been. What can you share with us about that?
Stanford Business School was one of my first clients when I decided to become a coach. So just so happened that in our congregation of the church that I led, which was near Stanford geographically, one of our members was running the communication program for the business school. And so when I exited my leadership role, at some point he asked me, hey, would you like to, he had seen me as a public speaker a lot because I was the minister of, a leader in his church. He said, hey, do you want to come and, work with us in the business school as a coach? And so I was like, great, that sounds like a great early client, to put on the resume. And so most of what I did there was leading workshops. I also coached some students. And the most popular workshop, and really the main one that I led the most, was called Speaking with Authenticity. And so it was a focus on when you're a public speaker, there's the technique side of things. How do you structure your language? How do you use your body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, all of that. But to me, I was always really intrigued with how do you really reveal yourself to your audience in a way that helps them really connect with you and feel a personal connection? And how do you connect with yourself and the things that are truly important to you personally, and then include that in your public speaking? Because I think that's so powerful, especially today. I mean, increasingly authenticity is so crucial. I think in the age of AI, even more so. But back then, it seemed to resonate with people. So it was a popular workshop, and I did that for several years early in my coaching career.
Yeah, it's interesting because I found in my executive career, they had offered more and more of those sort of courses that you're talking about with storytelling, with executive presence, and what that would look like. You had taught a course in the graduate program because I feel like that's something that people realize is so important later on in life, but it's actually so fundamental to your career journey because I think it impacts everything else. It impacts how you're perceived, how you communicate. And I just think it's one of those underdone areas.
Communication is really so big and foundational in leadership, being a good communicator. Another facet of that I think is kind of underdone in school is listening. Listening well is such a cornerstone of good leadership. And even when I was at the business school, I remember I offered a workshop on listening. And at some point there was some pushback because what they said was, well, the communication program doesn't really offer listening workshops. That's more the domain of the leadership program. But the communication program is more about, how you speak and how you write and your outbound communication. And I thought that was just crazy. Like, how could you have a whole program on communication and not include listening in that program? But it really is foundational, I think, for success in one's career.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And my background's in the sales world. And the number one thing they teach you is 80% listening, 20% talking. And listen, do I need to remind myself of that constantly? Yes, because I'm too much sometimes. But you see it when there are people just going on, and that ability to really, one, read the room socially, right? Understand who you're in the presence of, understand that there are other people that are there to participate, involve themselves. But then the other piece is the other person getting value out of what you're saying without taking that time to listen and involve them? So I just think it's so much more we can do in that space.
You asked earlier, I think you asked a misconception that people have about leadership early in their careers. And I do think that's what we're talking about now is another big one, that leadership is about talking. And of course it is about talking. That's part of it. You're giving a speech in front of the whole company, or you're sharing some information or the vision or whatever. Of course that's important. But I think the finest leaders that I've worked with are also really good listeners. And if you watch a senior executive, like a very senior executive working with their team, and of course there's a spectrum. There are many different kinds of executives, but the ones that I admire at least the most are really keenly interested in what their leaders under them have to say. And they're not just, talking and driving the whole time. They're trying to make the best decision. And the only way you can make the very best decision is if you really hear all the different perspectives in the room. So you don't make the best, being a leader doesn't mean you do it all yourself. You make all the decisions and come up with all the ideas. It really is about how you work with others. And listening is a big part of that, I think.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. So those that are coming out of university, what should they start doing now to position themselves to be on path for that one day of when they are a leader, whether it's for their team, their organization, whatever it may be?
I don't know if this is popular advice, but this is my honest advice. One thing that they should do is to work hard. I think that when I look at the ranks of leaders, even the youngest leaders that I work with, maybe 30 years old, who have been really successful, they work a lot. I mean, they really pour themselves into their work. It is not a matter of clocking in at 9 and clocking out at 5 and do the best you can during those hours. They are really dedicating themselves. And I know that's maybe doesn't sound like fun, but in corporations where I've worked, that tends to be a requirement. So that's one thing, is just hard work. I think another thing is to be really proactive about your own growth and development. You can't really sit back and hope that your company is going to just give you opportunities and here's another training to help you become a leader. And no, it's all on you. I mean, if you're lucky, maybe you're in a company that does offer some of those things, but I think you have to have the mindset and the assumption that your own growth is 100% your responsibility. So are you taking classes? Are you asking for opportunities? Are you seeing opportunities to do something that's needed in the company that nobody's doing? Maybe it's not part of your job, but maybe it's not something you get paid extra for, but it lifts up the company. That kind of proactive growth, I think, is really critical. And then the one other thing I would mention is kind of to expand on what I said before is around relationships. I would encourage people to really invest in their network and really stay close to the people that they know and build relationships with their coworkers. I cannot tell you how valuable, maybe a lot of your listeners know this if they came through business school but I didn't realize this until later. And I can't tell you how valuable it is, the relationships that you maintain inside your company and outside your company. Just keeping in touch with people, having coffee, sending somebody an article that made you think of them, or however you keep your network warm and build your network. I think it really is priceless throughout your career. So I would start early on that.
That's really good advice. And I completely agree with you with the hard work piece of it. And I think that, to your point, it is obviously hours and time and all of that, but it's also no one will hand you opportunities. Right now we have the internet, which is an amazing source that if you want to learn something, if you want to grow, it is at your disposal. But also companies have a lot of programs, opportunities, but you often need to look at them and ask for them. I haven't been in the situation where my management team came to me often and said, Laura, there is this, it's something that you see, whether it's on your intranet, but you have to go after it and request for it, and you gotta take care of yourself.
100%. A lot of bigger companies have all kinds of development programs that they don't communicate about very well. And you won't find them unless you ask. You have to hunt them down. If you have an amazing manager, maybe they're taking time to do that. But even good managers, they're often just too busy, and they have a lot to do. They care about you. They want you to grow, but they themselves may not even know about all the things that are available. So you really do have to hunt them down. I'm sorry, just to expand on your internet point, I think AI is a great opportunity for leadership development and growth. think if you're wondering how to get ahead in your career, it's not that I would believe everything that your AI tells you, but AIs can act pretty well, like pretty effectively as an executive coach. So if you tell an AI, hey, I want you to be my executive coach, here's my situation, I'm trying to get, move forward my career or whatever, I would say probably 70 to 80% of the advice that you get will be pretty good. And, maybe talk to a few different AIs to kind of error check, fact check, but it's a resource that didn't exist, until fairly recently, and it's a good one.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too. There's so much available, but the responsibility is yours to go after it. So I think that's a point that no matter where you're at in your career, it's so incredibly important. So Eric, we end every podcast in the same exact way. So no one ever told me this, but early in my career, nobody told me blank. And once I figured it out, it changed everything for me.
What came up for me when I heard that was it's harder than you expect. And it's supposed to be hard. So the fact that it's challenging to develop your career, to be successful in your role, to get the promotion that you want so badly, that it's harder than you expect it to be, that's normal. And I think many of us, for some reason, come into adulthood with an expectation that if it's supposed to be easy, and if it's hard, it means we're getting it wrong. We're doing something wrong. But that is just not true. In fact, it is challenging. All the things in life, at least in my experience, most of the things in life that are really worth having involve some difficulties along the way. And you have to work at it harder than you expect. You want to have a family, you want to have a successful relationship, you want to have a good career, you want to be a leader. It's going to be hard. And so accept that now, and it's okay. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. Be prepared to do hard things, because when you push against those hard things, you climb those mountains, you do really learn and you grow and you become stronger. So I don't think that I realized that coming into the workforce, and I think it probably made it more painful for me as a result. So that would be the thing that I would share.
That is incredible advice. I thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you, and I hope to have you back one day soon. So where can folks find you and connect with you?
They can just look up my name on their favorite AI, or Google my name, or they can check out our website, which is sierraleadership.com. And Laura, it's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Take care.